Okay. Okay, so we will be talking about telling your lore with what you are wearing. I'm Squire Antoinette. I'm Squire to Dragoon Dot. I'm also the PR coordinator of Bellegarth. I've been doing this Bellegarth thing since like 2007, which, holy shit. I am a Master Senechal and a Journeyman Artificer and a mentor in the Chroniclers Guild. And I love writing lore and making it work in the wild, so to speak. That's me in my office on Halloween. Because of course that's what you wear to the office on Halloween. So lore. What is lore? Lore is your Bellegarth persona's backstory. So, like, Antoinette is a Norse character. She's also a Moosewitch. And kind of crazy. But that's besides the point. It's also the stories of your persona's race. So whether that be elf or goblin or generic human 290, it's the stories that come with that. It's also the stories of your realm or your area. So some realms have lots of lore, like Dunharrow. Some realms have no lore, and that's okay too. So what's the point, right? So your lore doesn't give you any additional powers on the field. That's true, but it adds to the immersion. So, like, we're not going to talk a lot about monsters here because we kind of probably did that yesterday. But we are going to talk kind of about how they have a lot of depth of character, right? It's how they present themselves and who they are, what they wear, how they talk. And for me, at least, I sometimes forget some of these people are people outside of the sport because their immersion into their character is really good. So, like, for me, Cord. Cord's a goblin. Cord's never not a goblin. Cord wears a human suit when he goes to work, but he's a goblin. And it's just because he's very good at being that in the space they've created. But for non-monster characters, like humans and elves and dwarves, and people who aren't, like, generic monster who can paint, and like that adds to that level of being able to be like, you're a goblin because you're green. We don't have that as non-monster characters, so that makes it a little harder. But the point is, the more lore you have, the more lore you can play off of in what you wear, how you talk, and how you present yourself. So taking your lore, so your story of who you are, where you've come from, and putting that into your garb. So, like, specifically today, I'm wearing a apron dress. I don't have all the extra little bits on it because I don't know where they are right now. They're over there somewhere. But normally you have, like, brooches and things hanging off of them, and that tells you something, right? So hats, shoes, trinkets, like necklaces, jewelry, things that hang off of your belt, markings. So whether that's like face paint or like war paint or scars or other like symbols, specific textile patterns. So in different places in the world at different times, there were different textile patterns that came from different places through different weaving techniques. And then specific textiles, so cotton, linen, wool, brocade, silk, like depending on your where you come from, your stature, like in the community you come from, are you at the bottom of the rank? Are you at the top? Or things like the weather where you come from. Is it cold? Is it warm? That's going to kind of lead to the different textiles you use. Your belts. Belts say something about people in Bellegarth. If it's white, it's probably a knight or knight adjacent. Your feast gear, what you use to eat off of, can say something about your lore. your flags and your symbols. So, like, I call them flappy bits. So, like, my belt flags and other things change depending on, like, what I'm doing. For elves and hobbits and other non-monster but also not human characters, prosthetics, like ear tips, hobbit feet, can kind of help you do that. Contact lenses, if your character is supposed to be blind in one eye, you can get a whiteout contact lens. If your character is supposed to have a different eye color and contact lenses don't exist in your astigmatism, like me, you can get contact lenses to do that. Your armor, even. So, like, elves are going to wear a different style cut of leather than a Norse person's going to wear. The rule didn't pass, but I mean, Shark Mail works as Mithril if we can get that to pass eventually. You know, we'll see what happens. But, like, the cut and style of your armor says something different if you're coming from a different place, right? So all of these things can help you outwardly express your lore in a way that works in Belegarth, because, like, Antoinette's a witch. Does that give me any extra powers when I heal in the field? No. Will it ever? No, because that's not how our game works, right? So, like, having lore and expressing it just kind of adds to, like, what it can do. So we're going to take a look at some pictures, and we're going to talk about what they express and how they're doing it. So this is our first one. A lot of these pictures are of LARPs that are not Belegarth, because finding people expressing their lore through pictures or through what they're wearing in Bel is actually quite difficult. Because not a lot of non-monsters have lore. So some of these are European LARPs, but the idea is sort of the same. So here's our first picture. So, Paladin. I went with some kind of, like, basic ones. So the specific markers here are the symbols on her shield, which are specific to the LARP that she's a part of. And anyone using these symbols specifically are a paladin of a specific house. And then her mace is another use of paladins in this specific game. The chainmail over her skirt, the purity seals on her shield, and the text on her flag. So all of these things mark her as a paladin in this specific context. And lots of them are similar across other games. So, like, this one is, like, the cut of her armor, the symbols she's wearing, those all scream her character through what she's wearing and carrying. And let's take a look at this one. So, this is an elf who is also a ranger. So, you can kind of see right here, his ear tip doesn't actually match his skin tone, which makes it far more obvious that this is a prosthetic ear. If you care, you can get prosthetics and then use acrylic prosthetic paint to get it to match your skin tone a little bit better, so it's not such a stark, oh look, here's an ear tip kind of thing. So what specifically marks this gentleman as an elf is obviously his ear tips. What specifically marks this as a ranger is sort of how his garb looks. So the use of earth tones, you don't have... Sorry, that's my phone telling me something, and I hope it's not annoying. So what marks this specifically as a ranger is sort of the textile. So, like, you see there's lots of earth tones, leathers, furs, and it looks specifically like, if you look down here, and in all of the sewing, like all of the details here in his garb, it looks specifically like it's been repaired. It likely hasn't actually been repaired. It was probably created and is sewn together normally, but this is like detailed overstitching to make it look like repairs have been done. And so that like it looks like the garb's been worn. It looks like he lives in the wild. It gives off that feeling of like person who spends multiple hours in the forest a day, right? I don't know how to turn this off. That's fine. So now we have this one. So this is a druid, or a witch, kind of interchangeable depending on where you are in the world. So it's got more natural elements. So you've got bones and antlers, furs, leathers. And again, while there is some plum color going on, it's mostly earth tones. So you've got brown and some more brown, different shades of brown, white, the fur, and like the little trinkets hanging off of her, but also the war paint, right? So the layers that this person is wearing lends themselves to a more natural look. So you've got undersleeve, oversleeve, underskirt, overdress, woven belt, leather pouches, multiple belts. And so those natural elements lead to a more like naturalistic look. And the likelihood that the trinkets that this human is wearing mean something in the context of her backstory is fairly likely. So it was a little bit fancier. So we are only looking at this human here with the winged back piece. So this is a Polish hussar, specifically His Majesty Vladimir of the North Shield. These are SCA humans, but I'm going for the accessories here is what is important. So these wings wouldn't work in battle for Bell because protrusions over half an inch rule, I think. But they look really cool. And they specifically scream Polish hussar. No other mounted cavalry wore this on their back. And so it would be really cool for feasting in. And being super extra, which is kind of the point of telling your lore through your garb, which is being extra. Now we're here. So this gentleman is Norse, specifically male Norse. So his armor specifically, what it's made out of and where it ends on the torso are what's important. So most historically found Norse armor wasn't solid pieces of leather. It was lamellar, which is what this layered look is called. And it specifically ended kind of before your actual waist, where you would wear your pants. So it ends slightly above your natural waist point, right? So it's shorter. The torso armor is shorter than your actual torso is I think what I'm trying to say. And it's edged in a leather, and it's got shoulder pieces, and you see the shoulder pieces right here. In order to facilitate movement, they're not lamellar. They're just like garment leather that holds chest piece to arm piece or upper arm piece. And then the way his tunics are layered, so you'll see in lots of found information about Norse male dress that they were found wearing what looked like two different shirts. So a shorter overshirt and a longer undershirt that had more detailed trim. And then the pants. So they poof under his knee because they're wrapped up to his knee. So this style of pant, this style of leg wrap, and his shoes are all indicative of like a Norse kit, kind of generically Norse. If you want to get more specific into areas of what is considered Norse, there's other stuff you would have to look at. So now we are on Norse Female. So there is information that's been found that there are Norse female warriors, and they did not fight in dresses. They fought in pants, just like their male warriors did. We are specifically looking at Norse female dress in terms of a dress right here. So the markers here for this are obviously the brooches. They can be different shapes, but they are mostly this shape. And they actually hold your dress strap to the top of your bodice. So they're sewn in the back, but they're loose in the front. Mine are sewn in the front because those brooches get in the way a lot, so I don't always wear them. But from them hang those necklaces. So beads, you can hang beads, little things with sewing needles in them, keys, whatever, can all hang off of there. And that adds to the aesthetic. The type of fabric that she's wearing, it's wool. The trim on it and her belt is probably woven, and it's probably woven out of cotton or wool, but the underdress and the overdress are made out of wool. And that's indicative of being Norse because most of those countries are pretty cold. And so wool was pretty common if you're going for historical accuracy. If you're not, it doesn't really matter. But if it's cold, you're going to want to wear the wool. All right. So this is Persian, specifically female Persian. And one of the interesting things here is the way the fabric's cut. So if you're looking to portray a certain person from a certain area or of a certain rank, the cut of your garment is going to be important. So the way your garment sits on your person is the important thing here. So you see how her coat is cut out right here? That's the important part of Persian outerwear for this rank of human. The type of fabric is important as well. So this over fabric is brocade and probably silk, which means they were probably of a higher status. And then you can also see she's wearing what we would call harem pants as a leg layer. And this is one of the interesting things about Persian garb is that women wear pants, not just skirts. And they even wear pants under skirts. So you'll notice like the white layer is the base layer. And then there's a purple jacket with buttons going down the front and then an outer jacket. Okay. Talking really fast again. Finding you in your garb. So finding you in your garb isn't going to happen overnight. It takes many outfits and many times and many errors to get there. It's a building process until you feel happy, comfortable, and like yourself. So it took me a lot of fancy Tudor and Elizabethan dresses with impractical trains and stupidly long sleeves for me to figure out that wasn't what I wanted to do. That I prefer nice tight sleeves that don't get in my way when I do anything, and I don't need to worry about my train dragging through the mud when the site floods. So even my fancier garb, so like the stuff I wear to feast, the thing that changes there isn't particularly like the style. So like it's still fairly plain, but the colors and the cut change. So I go from wearing something that looks like I can work in it to something that's a little fancier. The sleeves might be a little bit bigger. And it's just that little bit of a change. The other thing that's going to happen when you start to like incorporate trinkets or symbols or war paint is people are going to start conversations. And it gives you a chance to share your lore. However, they may just be asking where you got something. Sometimes. So you want to practice what you want to say when people ask you about the trinkets that are connected to your lore. I normally start with, do you want to know about the lore that this is connected to, or do you want to know where it came from in real life? Because sometimes people just want to know where you got it or how you made it, not necessarily the lore behind it. But sometimes they want to know both. All right. Close that. I don't know how to stop sharing my screen. Exit. Stop presenting. Does anyone have any questions? William?
Hi. What do you how would I phrase this? What elements do you think would be good for an undead kit?
Well, I would start with what did you die in? And so what did your character when they were living die in? And then take whatever that outfit is, build it and bury it in the dirt. I'm literally not kidding. Because if you were undead, you were probably buried somewhere, and when you raised yourself up out of that dirt's going to be in your garb. So your garb's never going to look specifically very clean, right? Like, you are not going to walk out of the ground in pristine condition. There's going to be rips, tears, rotted sections, and it's going to be dirty, and that's okay because that's you're undead. So there's a way to control rips and tears and like shredding of garb. So like if you create a hole, find a thread that identically matches the color of the fabric you're wearing, and just very like so kind of like let it fray, and then sew slightly in from the frayed edge, and then your fabric will only fray to that stitching line and then not any further. So you're not like destroying your garb and you're making a new tunic every time you have to go to an event, but like it still looks like there's a rotted hole there because you've sewn around that. And Nakus is right. Clear nail polish can also help set frayed things so they don't go away.
Interesting.
Leita, you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I was typing it, but I was just going to say if you choose to do a stitch instead of nail polish, you'll want to make sure you use a zigzag stitch. Fabric can still fray through a straight stitch, but a zigzag will hold in place a lot more. And if you color match your fabric, it'll be very invisible unless someone like me comes around and is like, oh, how'd you make that?
And it's like right here. But like at a distance on the field or like in a normal conversation, you're not going to notice. So like if my eyelid holes were done with black thread, you would not even notice they're there. I purposely had them done in red so that I could see where they were because I'm blind when I'm sticking my like they're there to hold my brooches in. And so like if you color match your fabric, so like if I did these eyelets in black, you would never have seen them. So that would be where I would start. Undead are kind of classified. Oh, right. Nakus, you can unmute your microphone, dear. Notice, like, how did you come back? Like, how did you die and then return? So, like, if you were animated by someone or there was magic involved, that may change how you look when you become back alive. So maybe you didn't get buried in the ground and you didn't pop out of a hole. But you're also like a corpse. So like your skin's going to be paler than normal. So like foundation that makes you look slightly ashy or makeup that makes you look slightly sullen is going to help. So like makeup that makes your eyes look slightly set further back in your face or like sunken is going to help. So like all of the corpse bride kind of makeup look is going to help. But that all depends on like how you died. Like where is the wound from when you died? Is that something you're going to want as a mark? So like Kaleda, for example, he has a huge scar or had a huge scar that goes straight down his face in character. And so he used to do that with just like a line of face paint, but now you can get prosthetics that do that. So does he have a gaping hole in his chest because he got shot with a cannonball? Or is it just like a little injury or a little like bullet hole that you can do prosthetic wise and make like where you got shot through your shirt's going to be a hole, and then you can see that prosthetic through the hole, and it kind of makes it look like your chest cavity's not there because you're dead. Like those are all things I would start there, like figuring out how you died, how you came back, and then what that means for you walking around on the planet now. Does that help?
Yeah, that definitely helps. I've actually never taken that approach before. I've just looked at other cosplays. This helps a lot. Thank you.
Not a problem. Does anyone else have any questions? In my I take half an hour for an hour class. That's okay. Do you have any questions, Nakis? Ain, do you have any questions? You turned your camera on.
I'm like trying to stop my brain from doing this so that I can pull the questions out.
Okay.
And I'm like, I feel like I have some too, because my lower half of my kid is So I'm like,
what is your lore, Leta?
Leta, though her name doesn't match it because it's a Latin name, but Leta hails from the Asian country of Kamigawa. She is the daughter of a landlord, so comes from some amounts of wealth, and has made friends with monster characters at young ages. That's the 30-second version. So really the easiest way would be to incorporate more Asian characteristics into my garb.
Right. And so we want to be really careful when you are portraying a culture that's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
We're very careful with how you do that. So it's appreciation and not appropriation.
Yeah.
So like Antoinette in a different there are a lot of things that come from my life before Bell, where I worked at a historical site. And I have I wear a lot of moccasins and beadwork, but I do that in a way that doesn't make it feel like I'm taking them, because I'm not. I've made most of them myself, right? So you've got to be really careful, and especially when it comes to dark elves or drow who are black, their skin's black most of the time in characterization, but a white dude rocking up in black face paint with elf ears isn't gonna fly, even though it's high fantasy drow, because it's just not gonna fly, right? So we've sort of changed that into having other markers for things. So how do you distinguish a dark elf from a regular elf? And it's probably the ear tips and the ears are going to be painted a darker color, and not necessarily a black color, but a darker than your skin tone color. And that's okay. But rocking up in full black paint is not okay. And so we have to be really careful with those things, because in high fantasy, yeah, that's fine. In the world that we live in, it's not fine. So that's also a thing you have to think about. I didn't make my character First Nations, even though I have all of that background knowledge, because it wouldn't be okay.
Yeah.
But Antoinette has lots of First Nations friends. And so gifts of those sorts of things are normal, and that's also fine. But Thunderguard's lore is very much rooted in the Ojibwe lore and culture of what Thunder Bay as a city was before it was taken over by white settlers. So we have a very rooted in this is the Ojibwe creation story, this is what Thunderguard believes sort of thing. And we do that in a way that doesn't make it seem like we're stealing it, and makes it appreciative and historical of the actual area our realm is from. So you've got to be really careful walking those lines. I know you're talking about this in the peerage council, so I'm trying not to step on whatever conversation you're going to have about this.
Because really, my intent was just to bring up the conversation. I don't have a lot to say.
Oh, I do.
Okay. Good. I hope you'll speak up more there as well.
I will. And so that's also a thing you have to think about. It's the same with we have and then words. So like for Leda, so for you, because your character comes from some wealth, the textiles you choose to wear can be what would have been slightly more expensive, right? So like silks and brocade and pattern silks and pattern fabric, because those your family would have had the money for you to have those, and you would have had custom tailored things because your family were landowners and they wanted to like show you off to all the other landowners to get you married, sort of thing, right?
Sure.
Like, so your garb could be fancier when you're not fighting, because fighting in like really fancy garb is stupid because it's going to get destroyed. But like off the field, what you wear and like even like how you cover your weapons and like what symbols you put on things will show like that off. Yeah. And even like when you wear armor, your armor might be slightly more detailed than peasant number 250 who just wears a single like shaped piece of blank leather. Yours might be highly detailed with like symbols of your household or what have you. And so like those are little things that play into that as well. Did your brain finally cease so you could pull out questions?
Well, Nakus did ask a question. I think they had to leave, but asking about if there are any racially or lore oriented groups in the game, and I just was gonna say yes. Pretty much all the monsters have very rich and vibrant lore, which they were presenting some of last night. And tomorrow, the
I think he was talking. So Nakus and I used to be in the same unit. We were both in the Order, where lore was a part of like our unit expectations. So that may be the question he's getting at. He's also my apprentice, so I will answer him later.
Yay. But also, yes. And also come to my Fae class tomorrow where we'll be talking specifically about Fae lore, and we'll be talking more about appropriation and appreciation in a different context of Fae folk.
Yeah. Because there's lots that goes on there.
Yeah, it's like I'm trying to put my presentation together and I'm like, it's just so much, especially because I want most of the conversation to be an actual discussion about building our lore and not me just babbling on about appropriation and appreciation.
Yeah. I tried not to put in too many pictures for us to talk about because I did not want to babble on. My camera's lighting keeps getting worse and worse, and I keep fading further and further into my chair. Whatever. It's the best we got. I'm surprised it even works. But so yeah, like, but honestly, wearing your lore on your person or with what you carry around, your feast gear, your drinking vessel, can tell a story that like it doesn't happen unless you're a monster in a lot of cases in Belagar. So like my armor, which I don't have, or I'd show everyone because it's in Utah and I'm not, is super detailed because Antoinette had the money to pay a really good leathersmith, blacksmith, whatever we would call them in the lore, to do that. So like every single piece of my leather is tooled to the high nines. That's fine. But like if Antoinette was poor as shit, she probably would A, not have as much armor as she had, and B, it would not be tooled to have the high nines, right? So like when you're working with your leather workers, armor smiths, garb people, and you sit down and talk about your aesthetic, that's also important. So like things like this little piece of trim is tablet woven and historically accurate to being a Norse person, including the pattern and everything. So like the stuff you put on your garb matters. So like with Anya being Fae, it's that doorbell is my phone, by the way. It is not somebody's door. I hope that hasn't confused people. That's my diabetic alert saying, Antoinette, your blood sugar is too high. And so where Antoinette wears a lot of very muted colors, Anya can get away with that. And the garb Nazi, or I shouldn't say garb Nazi, that is a bad term. The garb people who are snobs, garb snobs, there we go, who are like neon colors and rainbow aren't a thing that are historically accurate, she can go, I'm Fae. What is historical accuracy? And flounce away. Where if I tried to wear that, everyone would be like, the heck is wrong with you? So, like, it's also those sorts of things. So, like, that matters. So, like, your color palette, like, Thumbs and I have this discussion all the time because he thinks I don't wear enough color. But I think he wears too much color. And so, but that's just who we are, right? So Antoinette's color palette's pretty subdued. I think the brightest piece of garb I own was a piece of garb made for a Chaos Wars pub night whose theme was like the 7 deadly sins. And so Zeldrin and I went as twins, but he went as the sin and I went as the virtue. So I have a white and yellow or like white and gold tunic for that. And I think that's the brightest piece of garb I own, to be completely honest. Everything else is red, black, brown, or like forest green and brown. And so like that, the color palette matters. Like, so someone who's a fae or an elf is probably going to wear, or like a high elf is going to wear brighter colors than like I would. And in the terms of words, like Leta, because she has money to pull, or like money to pull on in her lore, her garb is going to be fancier. It's going to be more detailed, which comes through in all of the embroidery work she puts on absolutely everything. Lore-wise, she probably didn't do that herself because she got servants for that shit. But like, that is a way to play on those things. So like the detail in your garb, the detail in your trim, those sorts of things pull on those details, and like help you show off who you are. And so Phagos probably does that with all of his fancy armor because his armor is really cool looking and that tells a story too. And you can do that with what you wear and how you wear it, and even the feastier you choose to use. Mine's wooden, which travels really well because Antoinette travels everywhere, and doesn't really have a place to call home per her story at the moment. But someone who lives, and so like Anya, being Fae, is probably not going to have iron feast gear. It's going to be wooden or plaster or something much more natural. And that may be a thing that they play off of when other people have iron feast gear around and be like,
no,
so those are
touchy.
Yeah, no touchy with the horrible iron thing. I'm waiting for the day that you get knighted and we have to remind your knight that he can't knight you with an iron sword because it will kill you. And I'm honestly going to enjoy that because he's going to have to find a non-iron sword. It's going to be great.
It's going to be a lightsaber.
Probably.
That's not period.
Have you
What's
met Thumbs?
What's period?
Historically accurate.
Have you met Thumbs?
My Mandalorian armor is also not period.
No, he's a superhero.
Well, it's fantasy. Right? It's fantasy. We're good.
We got this.
He and I also have the what's fantasy and what's medieval fantasy discussion a lot. A lot. But yeah, so it's just little things like that. Like when I'm fully decked out, so like I have a leather mantle that has like rabbit fur and fox tails, and I have rabbit fur that comes off of places. And Yui just made me the most glorious overskirt that's like leather and dyed linen with symbols in it, and it's goddamn amazing, and I'm too lazy to make shit like that myself anymore, but it's got like pockets for vials that have like that are gonna be like fake potions and stuff. So like I'm gonna like use resin inside of like little plastic bottles and like those sorts of things, and like eventually a walking stick that will have like a moose hoof on the bottom, and those sorts of things. Like you can take your story, whatever it is, and your persona, whatever it is, and find little ways to put it in what you wear, and then it's a nice way to like take all of this lore you've worked very hard on that means absolutely nothing in terms of your fighting, because we're not Amtgard, and make it mean something outside of that. And if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to contact me. You can do so at Antoinette@belagarth.com, and I shall answer your email questions. Or you can add me on Facebook. But I think most of you have me on Facebook, so I don't think that's going to be a problem. But yeah, that's it. Unless anyone has any other questions.
Who are you getting blanket points for?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Yes. I think I'm the only one of us earning blanket points at this event. Except Hobbit, but I don't know. Actually, do Hobbit and I even earn blanket points?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I mean, he hasn't shown up to any classes.
I mean, yes, but he's the only other EBF happening at this event right now. The rest of them are a little busy trying to figure out travel.
I've been giving Anya here her point for every class she's moderated, so or half a point.
Yeah, Sid's job is to figure that out. I mean, I have a feeling Galfa's going to win, but that's just because there are physically more of them at this event than there are any of the rest of us. But we'll see. This is I am the Chaos Wars event coordinator person thing. If you haven't already bought your Chaos Wars shirt and you want one, you should go buy one.
I'm gonna.
They're really cool. You can wear them in the shop. See?
We're actually getting the same base color shirt this year as you're wearing, but a different, I think with the same colors, but just a different symbol. It's a bus. It's a bus of undead rocking up on a knight holding a plague banner.
That's fun.
Our t-shirt designer guy James did the art this year just because we were too lazy to do our own art, so we're just gonna pay him to do it.
And it's paying for convenience.
Well,
isn't that what we all do?
Yes.
That's why we have other people make our garb and armor and other stuff. All right, I'm gonna hop out of here and go eat food because it's 5:45 for me.
Thank you so much, Antoinette. This
Thanks
was a delight. I love talking about lore all the time, always.
Well,
forever.
I have no life, even during the school year, because I live in the middle of